I didn't think anything of it when the man set up his tent near mine. It was a public campground. People camp close to each other all the time. But by midnight, I realized he hadn't come there to camp. This happened a couple of years ago, in early October, after one of the most stressful work weeks I'd had in months. I was 25, working an office job that paid fine but slowly wore me down. By Friday afternoon, I wanted one quiet night with no emails, no meetings, and no one asking me for anything. The campground was about an hour and a half away. It sat near a wooded lake with a gravel loop road, a ranger kiosk, a bathroom building, and a narrow trail down to the water. The back row of tent sites had thick trees directly behind them. The ranger said it was a slow weekend. A few RVs were near the entrance, but the tent sites were mostly open. I picked one near the back because it looked peaceful. Woods behind me, a picnic table, a fire ring, and no one close enough to hear me unzip my tent. I set up before sunset, tossed my sleeping bag inside, put my cooler near the table, unfolded my cheap camping chair, and made instant coffee. By the time I got back, it was almost dark. I started a small fire with damp wood from the kiosk. It mostly smoked and cracked, but I didn't care. My phone had one bar if I held it toward the road. I called my sister because she liked knowing when I went somewhere alone. I told her the place was quiet, that I was fine, and that I'd probably leave Sunday morning after breakfast. She asked if anyone had gone with me. I laughed and said, "No, just me." Around 8:30, I heard tires on gravel. At first, I thought it was someone looking for the bathroom or a ranger driving the loop. But the car slowed beside my site. Headlights washed over the trees behind my tent, then swung away as the vehicle pulled into the empty campsite directly next to mine. That felt odd. There were plenty of open sites. Some were closer to the bathroom. One had a better view toward the lake trail. But this person chose the site right beside mine, close enough that I could hear the car door creak and the trunk pop. A man stepped out. I couldn't see him clearly because he turned his headlights off. He used a small flashlight pointed at the ground. He pulled out a small tent, set it up quickly, and staked it down without making much noise. He didn't start a fire, he didn't cook anything, he didn't play music, open a cooler, or talk on the phone. He just sat outside his tent facing my campsite. I told myself I was being weird, so I kept sitting by the fire. A few minutes later I said evening without looking directly at him. He didn't answer. For the next hour nothing obvious happened. The fire burned lower. The RVs near the entrance went quiet. Leaves shifted behind my tent. The night got colder. Then I heard the man speak. Not loud, not to me. More like he was talking to himself. "Yeah, I'm by myself." I froze. A few seconds passed. Then he said, "Back Sunday morning?" My stomach tightened. Those were close to the exact things I had said to my sister. Not perfect, not in order, but close enough that I knew where they came from. Then, very softly, he said, "No, no one came with me." The fire popped, and I flinched. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was on a call, maybe he had his own plans. But I couldn't see a phone light. I couldn't hear another voice, and he had repeated the words in a flat way, like he was practicing them. That was when the whole campground changed. The trees didn't feel peaceful anymore. The empty sites didn't feel private. They felt far away from help. I stood up and poured water over the fire earlier than I planned. Steam hissed up, and smoke rolled over the ground. I grabbed my flashlight and got into my tent. I lay there in the dark with my jacket still on, telling myself I would leave early in the morning. Then I saw his silhouette pass across the side of my tent. He wasn't right against it, but close enough that his shape moved across the fabric. Slow. From the front of my site toward the back, then gone. A minute later, gravel crunched behind me. The back of my tent faced the woods. There was no reason for anyone to walk there unless they had stepped behind my campsite. I held my breath. There was a cough, quiet, close. Then footsteps in leaves. They moved behind the tent, stopped, moved again, then circled towards the picnic table. I heard a zipper open and close somewhere off to my left, then again, slow, deliberate, like he wanted me to hear it. I reached for my phone, no service. Something knocked lightly against my cooler, once, then twice. Not hard, just enough to make the plastic tap against the table leg. I didn't move. A few seconds later he whispered, "You awake?" He said it like he was standing outside a bedroom door. Then I heard my folding chair scrape across the dirt. It dragged over gravel with a rough, grinding sound. I knew exactly what it was. I had left it near the fire ring, facing the dead ashes. I waited until I couldn't hear footsteps anymore. Then I moved inch by inch toward the front flap. My fingers found the zipper pull. I opened the tiniest gap. Cold air came in first. Through that narrow opening I saw my chair. It had been moved right in front of my tent entrance. The man was standing beside it, only a few feet away, facing my tent. One hand rested on the back of the chair like he had just pulled it there and was deciding whether to sit down again. I closed the zipper without making a sound. Eventually I heard footsteps moving away from my sight, toward the bathroom building. His flashlight beam swung across the ground, then disappeared near the path. That was the only chance I thought I would get. I grabbed my keys and phone. I left the sleeping bag, the tent, the cooler, everything. I didn't even put on my boots properly. I slipped my feet into them and crawled out as quietly as I could. The campground looked empty and grey in the moonlight. My car was maybe 30 feet away, but it felt much farther. I kept my eyes on it and tried not to run because running seemed louder. When I was a few steps from the driver's door, a voice came from behind me. "Forgot something?" It was casual, almost friendly. I turned enough to see him standing near the bathroom path. I hadn't heard him come back. He was still too far away to grab me, but close enough that I could see his face in the weak light. He was smiling. I ran the last few steps, got in, locked the doors, and started the engine with shaking hands. As I reversed out of the sight, my headlights landed on him. He didn't chase me. He didn't shout. He just stood in the road, smiling, and lifted one hand like he was waving goodbye to someone he knew. The next morning, I called the campground office. The ranger said no one had checked in for the site beside mine. It hadn't been reserved, and there was no record of anyone matching the description I gave. I went back later that day with a ranger to get my things. The chair was still in front of the tent. My cooler was open, and on the back side of the tent, facing the woods, there was a clean cut through the fabric. It wasn't big enough for someone to crawl through, not yet, but it was long enough for someone to pull open with their fingers and look inside while I was sleeping. I filed a police report, but nothing ever came from it. There were no cameras in the back loop, no plate number, no name, just a man who showed up after dark, listened to my phone call, and left before anyone could prove he had ever been there. I still go camping sometimes, but I never choose the edge site anymore, and I never sleep with my tent facing the woods.